Welcome back to Injustice for All, episode 17 with Judge Joe Brown. And today's topic is Tyre Nichols and the not guilty verdict of the three police officers in Memphis from Memphis, Tennessee. So where do you want to start? Do you want to give a quick summation from the beginning? Well, let me read this. Three former Memphis officers were acquitted Wednesday of state charges, including second degree murder and the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols after he ran away from a traffic stop, a death that sparked nationwide protests and prompted renewed calls for police reform in the U.S. The jury, which appeared to be all white, took about 8.5 hours over 2 days to find to Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith not guilty on all charges after a 9 day trial in a state court in Memphis. After the jury's verdict was read, the defendants hugged their lawyers as relatives of the former officers cried. One relative yelled, "Thank you, Jesus." Three defendants still faced the prospects of years in prison after they were convicted on federal charges last year, though they were acquitted of most serious charges then too. So Nichols was a 29-year-old black man who allegedly fled a traffic stop after he was yanked out of his car, pepper sprayed, and hit with a taser. Five officers who were also black caught up with him and punched, kicked, and hit Nichols with a police baton, struggling to handcuff him as he called out for his mother just steps away from his homes. He died January 10th of 2023. 3 days after the beating, and the incident directed intense scrutiny of police in Memphis, a majority black city. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the verdict.
Well, for the last 2 years, I've been saying this trial was not going to be tried by a Memphis jury because of the loudmouth antics of Kamala Harris, Chicken George Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and let's see, the director of police, Chief Davis, who never should have been hired in Memphis in the first place, former Mayor Strickland and current Mayor Paul Young, and it was inevitable that that case was not going to have a Memphis jury because the pool here was horribly tainted. Now, I guess they got what they wanted. It was engineered. I predicted it when they first started it. The interesting thing right now is we're going into this thing with the civil lawsuit that Ben Crump filed. Interestingly enough, the plaintiff in that case is a biological mother of Tyre Nichols. However, under Tennessee law, there's an interesting twist to it, which is since she put Nichols up for adoption and he was adopted under Tennessee law, all her rights as a parent are extinguished, and technically the way I read the law is she would have no more standing than anybody listening in on this podcast to file a lawsuit. However, she has, and the statute of limitations is run on the adoptive parents out in California. That's interesting. So if anybody settles anything, it will be crooked, and there's a con game going on, and somebody needs to look into it and prosecute. The district attorney, as I have said for the last 2 years, was a rookie, an amateur. He was a law professor, practiced no criminal law, and he undercharged them. He did not charge them with the right offense, which should have been murder in the perpetration of a felony, to wit, aggravated assault. There was an inadequate investigation. The prospect of prior encounters between the parties, which was alleged by some entities, was not investigated, and it was a real live mess, is a real live mess. And the police department has a black female chief. The sheriff's department has a black sheriff. 75% of both forces are black. The majority of the criminal court judges are black and female. And let's see, 75% of the jury pool is black, which they could have had this stayed in Memphis. However, it was not because of their indefensible behavior at trying to grandstand the thing to drive up international attention. and help out Kamala Harris's election, which is not what you're supposed to use the law for. So they got what was predicted by a number of criminal defense lawyers, self included. And although I've been retired from the practice for quite some time, uh, what came out was inevitable. So let's see where it goes from here and whether the city attorney's office is going to file for dismissal for lack of standing on the lawsuit. There might be some saving grace for a minor who was the child of the deceased Tyre Nichols. But there's more to the story than seems to have been brought out by the press, but that would not have promoted the police brutality thing, which the woke crowd says there's always white police jumping on somebody black, but in this case, everybody involved was black. So that fails. And basically, what was going on is they had the so-called Blue Crush unit, which became the Scorpion Squad. And they had a series of resignations of the commanders of that squad because of the incompetence in the management of the Memphis Police Department. Essentially, those in charge didn't know what they were doing and couldn't keep command authority backed up on that particular unit, so they kind of got out of control. And I think the senior person in the unit is 30-some years old. And the age range goes all the way down, and the unit was created as the Blue Crush unit in response to citizen demands to do something about the ever-escalating crime problem in Memphis, which right now is faced with the disgusting distinction of being the 10th most dangerous city to live in the entire world and the most dangerous American city to live in. I think the next most dangerous American city is somewhere down number 23 on that list. That just gives you some perspective, and things are out of control. The mayor can't go anywhere without 5 to 8 armed policemen in uniform escorting him because he's afraid to. The city council, which is majority black, is most known for its crookedness and under the table dealing. And nobody respects what they have down in City Hall. They're trying to remove the district attorney on the state level, the one here, because of alleged incompetence and inadequacy, but that's nothing particularly new about that in Memphis. I remember when I was on the bench, one DA was 2.5 hours getting sworn in. Why? Because he'd never been in the criminal justice system in his life and didn't know where it was. But he was the new DA. So go figure.
Well, I want to bring in the money aspect of it. You briefly just mentioned it, so I wanted to bring this up. Next step for Tyre Nichols' family, $550 million civil lawsuit that could bankrupt the city. I want to play this clip here.
Let me just say this before you play the clip. Unless somebody is going to do something that has some knowledge of the law, there is no standing by anybody who is involved in this lawsuit to bring it under Tennessee law. So the $550 million should be gone quickly upon motion filed by the city attorney's office, which hasn't been done yet. So I don't know why. Maybe everybody was trying to be politically correct so that nobody got booed off stage for, oh my God, how can they do this? But there is no standing. So if somebody wants to research it, just look up what happens when you put a child up for adoption relative to your remaining rights as a parent. You know, the ludicrous thing about this whole situation is not one of these people has looked up Tennessee law relative to what happens to parental rights if the parent puts the child up for adoption. It's very clear, and it's been the law for quite some time. That would answer all of the questions. So if they're talking about what are they going to do about the $550 million, in other words, it sounds to me like the fix is in. In other words, how are you going to be liable for $550 million if the law on the subject is clear? How are you going to be liable on $550 million unless there's some kind of arrangement where there will be a settlement? And then I'd like to see somebody try this case for once, which doesn't seem to be that individual's practice, and we'll see where it goes. Now, I'm not offering any legal advice. I'm just making an observation as a citizen registered to vote in Memphis. So I've got a little stake in it myself since I'm doing that, and I'm speaking as an independent individual, not as a sitting judge or anything like that. This is BS. Somebody needs to look into this. And I think maybe considering that there is U.S. mail involved, United States wire communications, the feds need to get engaged in this. The other thing that bothers me is from the biological family on down, we have gotten all of this about the black running away when, look, you have 5 black officers who grew up in Memphis, by the way. So they are born and bred here for the most part. What are you talking about? Now, nobody has said anything about the people who raised this child to a man. And
I want to ask you this, because you're talking about 550 million, and of course, they had obtained Ben Crump, who never trials a case, but has his finger on the pulse when it comes to civil lawsuits. I did a space Thursday night, and we was talking about this, and he said the reason why because the question was, where's the outpour or the outrage specifically from Black Americans with this verdict, right? And so this man came up, he was like, you can't make money off it because the officers were Black. They were found not guilty. The victim was Black. Nobody cares about the victim. So if they're found not guilty and they're Black, the media can't make money off it. The politicians can't have a big hoopla about it. You can't make money off it. If they were found guilty, then people just say, okay, justice was served. Good night. So if you could if it was a white officers, or white, Black in whatever role, you could make money off it. So it's going to be a big thing. Do you think that's valid to a certain
yeah, and there's another thing too. The street allegations are very interesting. It's like there was also the possibility of prior acquaintanceship between the officers and Tyre Nichols relative to some alleged domestic matters. So the DA, he fired most of his staff when he came in. Granted, a lot of it should have gone, but he really brought in some rookies to replace the rookies that were let go. So you've got a prosecutorial staff in the city of Memphis, the most dangerous city in the United States, that was not what I call a first-class staff. And the previous DA, Amy Wyrick, was held by Harvard Law Review, Stanford Law Review. Hell, the Supreme Court of the state of Tennessee is probably the most corrupt elected prosecutor in the United States of America, who over a couple of decades had more findings against her personally for prosecutorial misconduct than any collective office had in the United States during the same time period. It was absolutely extraordinary, the disgusting dishonesty that came out of that office. And as I said, her predecessor didn't even know where the criminal justice system was. He was so disconnected with criminal prosecution. And during my sojourn in the Memphis area as a criminal defense lawyer, ran the public defender's office for the city. The first Black to do that was the first Black prosecutor for the city way back when. We had one DA who was notorious amongst the inmates because he'd done 2 years after involuntary commitment to a mental institution. And, it goes from there. So it's what are we trying to do here? And then you have to deal with $550 million as a lawsuit versus, let's say, Crump's thing with 28 million for George Floyd in a much more egregious case. And then he represented the family in the Trayvon Martin matter, but he was spouting off nonsense about we need to get rid of stand your ground. But the interesting thing about that, I'll say interesting instead of some more choice words, is that his dead client was the one that had the stand your ground right, and not George Zimmerman's. So I found that interesting. He was also pontificating about getting rid of the castle doctrine, which had absolutely nothing to do with this case. And that had to do with something that happened in somebody's home, and this was on a street corner. Then there's his experience as president of the National Bar Association, that's the Black Bar Association, and the huge drop in paid membership under his sojourn, and some other things that are probably going to come out in a short while. So what do we have here?
So let me ask you this question. Memphis is majority Black, 70% Black, right? And you talk about education, city hall, city council, sheriff department, all Black. But the majority of business owners are white. Black business owners only make up 11%. Why?
Yeah, the city administration is not supposed to favor any one racial group. It's just they exploit the Black racial group to get in, because essentially the administration in the city of Memphis is so deep in the back pocket, hip pocket, or crotch of the rainbow cult, it's pathetic. And a lot of the people who are members of the administration face allegations of not coming out of the closet. I mean, that's their business, but they need to let the constituents know who they're actually voting for. It is absolutely absurd because Memphis is in Tennessee, and Tennessee was the only southern state exempted from the civil rights enforcement provisions in the voting rights bill back in the 60s. And that was because blacks never lost the right to vote in the state of Tennessee, thanks to Boss Crump, totally unrelated to the lawyer. Boss Crump was another lawyer who, at the turn of the 19th and 20th century, was hired by the richest former plantation owner in Mississippi. His son, Robert Church, was the first black millionaire. And Robert Church was the son of Boss Church's high-bright slave mistress. Now, the old man that ran the plantations before the Civil War lost all of his sons in the Civil War. So rather than having his property escheat to the state of Mississippi when he died, which meant all of his land holdings and money would go to the state of Mississippi, he acknowledged his son with his mistress. But when that gentleman was in Memphis, a lot of the white people decided to take his property, and Tennessee property law looks real strange now because of that. So his daddy, Robert Church's daddy, hired Boss Crump, future Boss Crump, to come up from Mississippi to Memphis. And that future Boss Crump, who W.C. Handy did a jazz number after, decided that the best way to protect his new client was to control black politics and keep black folk from losing the vote. So damn near every black person in Memphis was a member of the Lincoln Republicans. And Boss Crump controlled the black bloc vote using black vote brokers who got paid well for the service. So Crump never had a white majority, but a large white minority, which he put with the black bloc vote. So he controlled Tennessee for 50 some years. He was so powerful that it is reported that the only time in the NFL this has ever happened, Green Bay was playing an exhibition game against the Detroit Lions here in Memphis, and Crump was 15 minutes late. So he hankered to see a whole NFL game. So, on pain of not making it back home on the train right in a good condition, the NFL blanked the scoreboard and kicked off all over again so he could see the quarter that he missed and see a full football game. You weren't a preacher, Boy Scout master, or held any position without Boss Crump's permission. So he set up this brokerage system, and Memphis has had that brokerage system ever since. And that's been 120 some years of having the vote delivered in Memphis. So that's still the case. And right now, the Rainbow Cult has captured it. And the only area in Memphis that gets any benefits, gets potholes repaired or street maintenance, is in the so-called Cooper, Young, and Midtown areas that are gay enclaves. So the other thing is Ford Motor Company contracted with a South Korean company known as Blue Oval, and they are going to set up an electric vehicle factory here in this area in a location known as Mason, Tennessee, which has 5,200 people. Blue Oval, this South Korean company, has already hired 15,000 South Koreans to import to Memphis, additional to 15,000 employees who are not to be hired locally to staff 30-some thousand employees in this factory, which, since there are going to be a lot of people from out of the country, let alone out of the state, out of the county, that's going to require a township of to accommodate 150 some thousand people, which will require another 150,000 for Malco's, Mickey D's, the grocery stores, hardware stores, clothing places, hairdressers, and all that other stuff. So you're talking about a city or a municipality of 300,000 people, which will be third or fourth largest city in Tennessee when it's completed inside of 5 years. And right now, where they're supposed to be locating is occupied by Mason, Tennessee, which has 5,200 people. So all of the elected hoi polloi downtown, the local yokels there are trying to race to see what kind of money they can get out of what's going to happen with Blue Oval, including divesting Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, the local utility company, of the resources it needs to rehabilitate its very decayed infrastructure. And they're trying to build up a shunt to supply water and sewage facilities to what is now Mason. Memphis passed a resolution in 1997 saying no contracts outside of the city/county except those that exist. And Mason had a long-standing one, so they're using that exception to build.
Can you swing it back to what I
am. So what's happening right here? Hold on. I'm coming back.
Okay.
But you got to get the big story. Now, that is what's going on in the big picture. That is exciting a lot of the local officials because they're going to get money under the table with it. Now, with Tyre Nichols having filed $550 million, it's a matter of apparently, why not? Let's steal some more money because we can all get a piece of this settlement if there's one. And the question goes back to what I said before. Why has no one gone out and filed a motion to dismiss based on a failure to have standing to bring an action against the biological family? Two, why is it that the mainstream media in this town channels 3, 5, 13, 24, and 30 haven't said anything about it when they ought to know about it, when the Commercial Appeal, the daily newspaper, ought to say something about it. But it turns out the same people own the Commercial Appeal, Channel 3, most of Channel 5, a whole bunch of Channel 13 and 24 and 30. So the same family that may be caught up with this owns the whole kit and caboodle, and they are sitting there dovetailed in with the whole 9 yards, so nobody knows what's going on because the media is poisonous. And this is an ample opportunity to bust the city down. Everybody can dip in, and that goes along with $28 million missing when it comes to the local county clerk's office, another $50 million that turned up missing that is allegedly gone through the county mayor's office, along with the 28 million, 5,000 missing license plates that went through the mail rooms for the county mayor that turned up missing, that are now turning up on stolen vehicles and interstate commerce. So it's a real big thing. And also Memphis, since 2008, has been subject to a Justice Department edict, since this didn't happen, but the Justice Department said it did in writing. That is that the voting machines, devolved voting machines adopted in 2000, are totally corrupted. The feds put up the money to replace them in 2008, but the first election that they were used in did not occur until 2023. So that's that whole lapse of what? That's 23 years from a finding way back in 2008. That's 23 years these machines have been in use. The finding in 2008 was they were totally corrupted. In the last election, which was for November 2024, this one that just occurred, I was a poll watcher and I was down there in the election commission, and they were having a frantic problem. You know what it was? They had more votes in some precincts than they had people who signed in to vote. So here we go, loop-de-loop, and this whole corrupt mess has made Memphis a swamp. It is a cesspool.
So, okay. So, in a nutshell, the reason why you only have 11% or less of Black-owned businesses in Memphis, it is because of corruption by City Hall, which is predominantly run by Black people, or is it more historical?
It's Black people, because remember, Black folk were the key to the voting patterns in this whole city all the way back to the turn of the 20th century from Boss Crump.
So basically, the Black people that are in charge are actually implementing white supremacist tactics on their own people.
And here's one of the things they could do. See, under American banking law, a bank has to have a certain percentage of all of its loans, financing, lines of credit backed up by cash on deposit in its own vaults or with the Federal Reserve. Now, this Black-run city insists on putting all of its money, this Black-run county insists on putting all of its money in a bank known as First Horizon. It used to be First Tennessee. So First Tennessee has an enormous store of cash that it used to ramp up what it loans. However, First Tennessee has been replaced by First Horizon, which isn't even an American bank. It's a foreign bank, for God's sake. And what happens is that foreign bank backs up financing certain people who didn't get wealthy by bribing. They got wealthy by setting stuff up to bribe the county commission and the city council. And they're into real estate acquisition, real estate management, real estate development. They find some excuse to get in front of the city council quietly or the county commission to get something built that the city pays for. And then the same people are into construction and construction material supply. So these five things, with the way they set it up so that tax money is funneled into their projects, and they funnel it back to the city council and the county commission. There's an ongoing series of bribes. We've got an international hotel chain that the current mayor got 3.7% of the money out of, and the city financed what they're doing for their development to the tune of $220 million. There is a 25-acre lot downtown, right in the center of downtown Memphis, that's been cleared of a lot of old buildings. It was acquired for $600,000 with no bid, and the city is putting $210 million into the development there to finance 28 luxury units and some upscale boutiques while reducing the parking downtown even further and making it more difficult and reserving it to those people who live downtown and have restaurant businesses down there. It's not even using it to set up office buildings or finance or any kind of management situation. It's residential. They've got Beale Street, but they've got 35, 40 squad cars every weekend down there that ought to be patrolling the most dangerous city in the United States of America. And they talk this nonsense about what we're doing is trying to preserve tourism. Crap. They're trying to just fleece this. And now the rental structure they've got on Beale Street is absolutely ridiculous. The newest lease down there expired 30 years ago, and everybody's on a month-to-month tenancy. And the primary leaseholders pay little to nothing to the city. And meanwhile, they sublease the properties for $15,000, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month. And it's a racket. And this city is hugely corrupted. Now, if you've ever seen one of John Grisham's movies, like The Firm, which was centered in Memphis, you see this thing about the mob coming in here and having a lot of things going on. Well, they actually do. And when he alludes to the corruption in Memphis, that's for real. And a lot of people are on the take here. It's a shame. They have roundup, sting operation after sting operation. And the people who run stuff here get sent to jail over and over again, and nobody seems to be perturbed about it. Criminal justice is a laugh sometimes. We had one criminal court judge who kept getting the black bloc vote, and this man had been former Grand Dragon for the Klan and chairman of the White Citizens Council, and he was a wacko. And I used to cuss him out on a regular basis at judicial conference meetings. And it's crazy. So we don't know who we vote for. Mayor Strickland, the last white mayor, which is the mayor before this current one, Paul Young. You know how Strickland got elected the first time? He had a black opponent. So what he did is he had some of the Negroes put out his sample ballot. And guess what he did on the sample ballot? He put his name under the black man's picture and put the black man's name under his white picture. And that's how he got in.
Wow. Well,
see, that's how crazy this mess is. So yes, it's corrupt. And I remember I had an onerous duty to do one time. I had to deal with requalifying almost 5,000 prospective jurors because this idiot, former Klansman, got up when he was qualifying the first big panel of 5,000. He told them that if a defendant didn't take the stand, that's because he's guilty and because he has a long criminal record. Remember, you have a right to remain silent. It cannot be held against you. Well, he told the prospective jurors to disregard that, so they had to disqualify all of those people permanently from jury service, and I had to qualify another 5,000. It's absolutely ridiculous what we've done in this town. We have judges down there on the criminal bench who have never tried a criminal case as a lawyer. It's pathetic.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? I do want to stay on top of Memphis as we go on, when we do the shows and stuff like that. Just digging deeper in corruption, because I know we've dug deep in Fulton County when it comes to Fannie Willis, and we haven't heard anything about her state Senate committee hearing. And maybe they broke a deal, but it's very quiet. But these things need to be talked about. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 17 of Injustice for All with Just Show Brown. Make sure you share this video, like this video, and comment below and share your thoughts and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Bye.